This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Yo, this is Sharmane from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Sharmane, aka Mixed Girl Maine, and I am so tired. And yeah, I'm so tired. And I missed the show. I'm so excited to have the holidays behind us and be able to just go forward in my regular routine, both my personal daily routine, but also my Militantly Mixed routine. I really missed this show. I think not producing regular episodes the last 2 weeks because of the holidays kind of added to, maybe not the cause of, but added to the depression that I fell into over the last couple of weeks. It was pretty bleak patch of time that I thought I wasn't going to be able to dig myself out of, but as soon as I got back to work on cutting the shows and stuff like that, I kind of dug myself back out. So I realized how connected I am to producing all three of the shows, Militantly Mixed, Blurred Comics, and Black Radical Queer. It's a need now in my life. It gives me so much joy that without it for the holidays, it really did make me sad. So I'm glad to be back at it. And before I introduce this week's guest, I would first just like to send out a really big continued thank you to the folks that sponsor us on Patreon. With your sponsorship, your continued sponsorship, we are able to cover all of our hosting fees for this show, which means that no matter how things are for my personal pocketbook, I know that at least I will be able to afford to upload an episode of Militantly Mixed every week because you've paid for it. So for those of you who are sponsoring us on Patreon or continuing to sponsor us on Patreon, whether it's at $1 or $5 or $10 or $15 or $20, every penny goes back into the show, and it really does help. So thank you so much. It is just nice to not have that extra stress. Now that I know that the show is important beyond just myself, but is actually important to the people that are listening and participating, it's nice to know that I'll never run the risk of not being able to upload a show because I can't afford it. So thank you so much for that. And to the folks that donated to the birthday fundraiser in December through our PayPal account, that allowed me to purchase some much needed equipment, and I have learned how to hook it up. Now I just need to learn how to operate it and make it sound good. So I've already gotten a little bit better at it, but still practicing. So within a month or so, I'll finally get to that level that I want to be at, and you'll start to hear better quality shows because of it. Thank you so much for donating to that birthday fundraiser. One, it made me feel good because I normally have crappy birthdays, and that was a really nice thing to happen for my birthday. And two, because I just know that with this new equipment, I'll be able to produce things better, faster, and more, just sound better. I'm so tired. Yeah, I'm just grateful. Thank you so much. If you would like to sponsor our show, if you're not already, and you would like to help support us to continue going and growing, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymixed and donate at a monthly level as low as $1 to as high as anything you wish. There are different rewards based off of the level that you subscribe to. And there will be exclusive content and early content available, which I will get better at. I'm usually slow to the game on that, but I am going to get a lot better at that and actually start programming time into my schedule to make that possible. And if you want to hit us with a one-time donation, that is also extremely helpful. It really does help us with sort of the extra things that come up related to the show. And so you can go to paypal.me/militantlymixed for that sponsorship portal. Every penny that gets donated goes directly back into the show. Nothing goes into my pocket. And don't forget to follow us on our social media, Twitter, which I'm getting a lot more active on, or have been for a while, Instagram, and our Facebook, all at Militantly Mixed. And the Facebook page is actually a real good opportunity for us to build up our community and actually engage back and forth. So if there's something in an episode that you heard that you would like to talk about, just reply or comment underneath the episode's post. And if the guest on that episode is also on Facebook, they will probably engage as well. If not, it'll be me and whoever else is on the show that wants to, or on the page that wants to chit chat. So start engaging there, because I think it goes beyond just the show. I think us mixed folks actually need to engage with other mixed folks fairly regularly to feel grounded and connected in our mixedness. And I can really hear my voice starting to go. So I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty fast. Okay. Our guest this week is Emma. She is from France, and she, like a lot of people who listen to this show, stumbled on the show through a search for a mixed race podcast. She said Militantly Mixed popped up, and so she started listening, and she sent me an email. I want to say it was about 2 or 3 months before we actually recorded this interview, and she just sent an email to say thank you. The show was resonating with her, and it helped her feel a little bit less alone in her mixedness, because she grew up in an environment in which her family was the only interracial family in the town that she was from. And so a lot of her adulthood is in sort of finding her grounding in her mixedness. And the show was a really good help to her for that. So I tried to get her on the show, and in the beginning she wasn't really, whether or not she was interested is, maybe not the case, but whether or not she was ready is actually more accurate to share her story. And so after a couple months of her and I engaging back and forth, she got to know me a little bit better, I got to know her a little bit better, and then one day she was like, yeah, I'm ready to do this. So we actually recorded this interview, I want to say it was the end of October or early November, and it was like 1 a.m. for me or 2 a.m. for me, and late afternoon for her, because she's currently living in the UK. And sometimes that's what you got to do. This is a global show. I don't care what time of day you need me to be available. I'm gonna figure out how to make it happen, even if that means I'm up in the middle of the night, or you're up in the middle of the night and I'm up in the middle of the day, whatever. Let's make it happen. So yeah, this was a really great interview, and it was really nice after so many months to be able to go back and listen to it and remember the connection that we had. It was really nice, and it's just amazing how similar we are as mixed race people, no matter where in the world we're from. I love this show. I love learning about things I didn't know. I just love it. So without further ado, we're gonna jump over to my discussion with Emma. All right, today we are joined by Emma, and are you actually in Great Britain right now, or are you in France?
I'm in Great Britain.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to our audience, and then let's get into it.
So I'm Emma. I lived most of my life in France, and my mother is biracial, so her mom is from Madagascar and her dad is from France, and my father is from the Netherlands. So I grew up pretty mixed, and I was looking on Spotify for a podcast, and I was just looking for something that related to my experiences, trying to find other stories of mixed people. So I just went into the search bar, typed mixed, and then this podcast popped up. So that's how I got into the show.
Oh, that's good that it came up that easy. I've been wondering if it was easy for anybody who was looking for something mixed. That's awesome. I'm glad that you found us, and you reached out to us. I want to say it was like 2 months ago, the first time that you and I contacted, maybe 3.
Yeah.
And so we've been exchanging emails here and there with a couple breaks of time in between, but we knew that eventually we'd get around to talking. Let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about what your upbringing was like growing up in France, being mixed. You mentioned to me you lived in kind of a small area, a small town. Is that true?
Yeah, so basically I was in a small, majorly white town. It was next to what you would call the hood, but it was never any interaction between the small town and the hood, basically. And so, it was mostly white people, and I was, a really, really small town. So, I mean, people of color were a bit, something that was kind of foreign to them, but it wasn't something that was seen as bad inherently. It was just, you would get that look from other people like, oh, she's different, but that was about it.
So if other people of color came into town for any reason, they would kind of stand out, but for the most part, it was pretty much just your family?
Yeah, and especially going out as a whole family, when it's like you're my white father and my black mom, and us with going as a family to town, and people just look at us and like, oh, these are so foreign. Like, are they really French or that kind of stuff? So, yeah.
So your Frenchness was called into question just because of being mixed.
Oh yeah, no, all the time. It was just when I introduced myself, it was like, yeah, so I'm French. I come from this town, and people will be like, oh, really? Like, are you really French? And I think it's like what a lot of mixed people experience, I guess. So, but it was really annoying.
Right. So here in the States, usually the question of any of us that are either racially ambiguous or even just people of color in general from white people will get, where are you from? And if you say like one of the states, California in my case, then they'll go, okay, but where are you really from? Or what country are you from? And then you explain, no, I was born here. And they're like, yeah, I get it, but where? Where do you come from? Is that something that's similar to where you grew up as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. I would always get that question. So yeah, where are you from? And I'll be like, France, because obviously that's where I'm from. And then they'll be like, oh, but like, where are your parents from? And I'm just like, it's I don't know. It's like, ask the questions directly if ever you want to. And I wasn't like uncomfortable telling people that I was mixed or that where my parents were from. It's just how they put the question that I was always like, it's not, you're not entitled to it all the time. Right. And also it's just a rude question to ask. Like I feel as French as you feel French. So yeah.
Right. I mean, it is your actual nationality. It's where you were born. So yeah. Why wouldn't you feel entitled to that? Yeah, I think that's pretty much similar here as well. Did you spend any time in the Netherlands or anything like from where your father was from, or entirely in France most of your childhood?
Yeah, I spent most of my childhood in France, but I would sometimes like go to see my family in Holland, and it was a different experience. It was so going out same as like a whole family out in like little towns in the Netherlands. It'd be like people staring at us, and I feel like it was more obvious in the Netherlands than in France for some reason. And they would just, you could hear people like talking about us and be like, oh, like, look at them, which is wow. And it'd be like, yeah. And they would stare at you for a while, and it made us really feel out of place, because I already like don't I've never lived properly in the Netherlands. So it was people like looking at you all the time, and just made me feel even more like foreign to my dad's country.
Right. So not only are you an outsider because you're not from the Netherlands, but you're also an outsider because of the color of your skin and the fact that they see that you have a white father.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So what would you say, like, what did you understand about yourself as a child in terms of your ethnicity or your race?
I mean, it was kind of bad. I feel like I was raised in a way that color wasn't really mentioned. So I always thought I was white for some reason. So,
yeah, that's something you mentioned in one of your emails. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So yeah, I don't know. My parents never mentioned race or anything. My mother felt very French. My dad felt very Dutch. And so growing up, I was like, oh, I'm white. Like I was really privileged in the sense that I didn't get like aggressions and stuff like that during my childhood. I was like, so my school was really open enough to not have those like microaggressions all the time. But I did have some, obviously, but I really felt like overly like on the whole like white. And it was just like, I realized like as I grew up that I wasn't. And it was just like something that I was really surprised at. I was like, wait, I'm not really white actually. It's just like
Do you remember how old you were when you noticed that?
I think I was I was in middle school, and it was just like meeting new people or like dancing or something, and they'll be like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm French. And they'll be like, oh, but you dance so well. You must be foreign or something.
Really? Like, is that a thing?
Oh,
Do they
yes.
think the French can't dance, and so you have to be from somewhere else?
Yeah, that's really sad, actually.
That's fun.
So, yeah. And I was like, wait, maybe I'm not really white. But yeah, I had that kind of stuff. Or even like shopping with my parents and like people going up to us and be like, hey, you're going back to the hood. And like my mom being so shocked. Like, why would you consider like us, like consider that we would even like go to the hood, like we're not like you or something like that. And it's just like, and I was like, wait, but like if she came up to us, it's like she thinks we have like something similar, and I was like, in common, and I was like, oh wait, skin color. So yeah, it was interesting.
So what would be considered the hood where you grew up then? Was it primarily, you know, black and brown people, or was it more like maybe Middle Eastern as well? What's the makeup for what you're referring to as hood there?
Yeah, sorry, it's because it's about France. So
no, like I think it's important to hear, because like my American audience will assume it to be like the place that I grew up, but I have a really large audience in Canada, Great Britain, and France actually as well, so they'll know, but the people here won't.
That's true. So basically, at least for where I grew up, it was mostly African countries, so it's not really Caribbean. It's mostly, so it might be Senegal, Mali, and then it'll be also like, I mean, there's other like countries, but like, and then it'll be Moroccan, Algerian, Tunisian. So yeah, it would be mostly like Africa.
Would they mostly be immigrants or first generation born in France?
It would be, it's split. It would be like immigrants and then also firstborn. So it's really diverse in that sense. But yeah. It's not, I mean, it's really different from the US, at least from what I get, because I've never actually grew up in a hood, so I can't really speak for them, obviously. But I feel like it was not as, obviously we don't have like guns or anything, so it would be less violent, and so it didn't feel as threatening for people who are outside. So like, I don't know why it was as segregated in France as it is in the US, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't like, I don't understand how my mom like directly assumed it was a bad thing to be linked to this because of her skin color, because inherently that's what people, to be honest, that's what people assume when they look at my mom or something.
Right. So do they ever even maybe compliment you on the fact that you can speak French or have a perfect accent or anything like that, because they're assuming that you're foreign in some way?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like I've always had that, oh wow, you speak such good French, or whatever. Yeah.
What was language like growing up for you? Did you have access to Dutch and I don't know the language that they speak in Madagascar actually. Did you have?
So basically, my mom doesn't know how to speak Malagasy, so that's already like a problem. And because my Malagasy grandmother emigrated France pretty young, she knows how to speak it, but she kind of forgot about it, because she just wanted to be part of the French culture and that kind of stuff. So it like she kind of forgot about her own language, which is really sad. But
And do you have access to culture in that case? Like, were there traditions or anything that you were brought up with, or because she immigrated so young, was that also missing from your life as well?
Yeah, I feel like I would like often come to her house, like, but not that pretty, like 4 times a year or something, and eat the food like that we have in Madagascar. So it would be like hogai or chicken curry or that kind of stuff. And it would be like really like refreshing to be there, and she would sometimes talk about her brothers and sister back in Madagascar and stuff like that. So it would be like kind of a good like healing in a way to like hear about her stories back in Madagascar.
Right. So that's actually something that comes up quite a bit in these conversations that I've been having is where, because we're mixed and whether or not we have a lot of exposure to our various cultures, in some cases we feel like something was stolen or missing. There's a huge gap in our lives, and in other places we kind of fill it with whatever we have the most access to. So like in my case, I grew up primarily around Black people with most of my Black family, although when I was with my mom's side of the family, I was Japanese, but like only in the house. I wasn't really Japanese elsewhere because I didn't have access to that kind of stuff. So like if I do see a Japanese cultural event or something like that, I try to really be Japanese, and then I realize once I'm there how not Japanese I am. Is that something like that you're kind of describing, like you get these little bursts of access to your culture, but not so much that it's a part of who you get to be?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like obviously, like in terms of my Malagasy identity, it's so little that I only get like bursts of it with like the food or just seeing pictures or like the stories that my grandma tells. But apart from that, it's like I have one of my closest friends is from Madagascar, and so it's a bit weird to see the difference between how we were raised, because both her parents are from Madagascar, and she has really that sense of at least pride, and she knows about her culture more than I do about. Right. And it's really good to have her as well, because she gives me that knowledge about my heritage as well.
Right. So do you feel like you kind of live vicariously through the lessons that you get from her just naturally throughout your friendship?
Yeah, I feel like it really does help that to know about like my heritage through her, and growing with that sense of, oh, I am from Madagascar. Like, it's not something that has been taken away from me and that I'm never going to get back or something.
Right. So that's a unique experience in terms of an African-based heritage. Here in the States, most of us that do descend from an African country don't necessarily know what countries we come from because we were stolen, and, our culture is stolen, our language is stolen, and things like that. So, and we're so many generations past that at this point that we don't even resemble the places that we come from. And so we feel that absence, or you'll see a lot of Americans sort of like grab, like it's almost like a quilt. They'll grab different parts of different African countries and put it together like it's their own culture, because they have no touchstone. They have no way of knowing where they're from. In your case, you at least have that access because you have a family member, you have a friend. Do you get to go there? Have you ever been there?
No, I've never been there. And it's something that really bothers me because I feel not worthy of my heritage, basically, which is really sad, but it's something that I feel, if there's this whole thing like, oh, but you've never lived there, or you've never even been there, so how can you even remotely feel Malagasy or say you're from Madagascar? Right. And I feel,
but that's a very common thing for those of us that are mixed. We all feel that kind of thing. I mean, at least everybody I've talked to so far has been that kind of a thing where you're just like, do you have the right to want access to that culture and that heritage if you weren't exposed to it, or you weren't exposed to it enough, say, for you to comfortably live in both places as if you were fully Malagasy or fully French, like wherever you could go, you could just fully be that. I think we all kind of have that experience where we feel, gosh, do I even have permission to experience this? On my show, I try to make sure that people do feel that they have the experience or the access to it or the permission, not from me, but from themselves. Like, if this is who you are, this is your heritage, and you want it, go get it, like, go get that heritage. Do you feel that growing up, so this is something that just comes up a lot on the show, where we kind of don't feel seen or visible as whatever our different ethnicities are? And in your case, growing up primarily French, what was your feeling about being Dutch too? Did you feel a sense of Dutch pride or anything like that growing up?
Oh yeah, it was a big thing, like back in my family, where we felt very French and very Dutch, and we would hang up like flags in our house when there were World Cups and stuff like that. That's and funny. It would be very, would feel very like Dutch or French. And my Dutch is not very good. My dad like taught it to us, but it was really not in as much as our French, because obviously we lived in France. And so my Dutch is really like restricted, but I do feel very Dutch, because we would go there pretty often to see my family. I can still speak decent Dutch, and we would have access to that culture in more ways than we had to my Malagasy culture, because obviously we went to the place. So, and we met like other Dutch people like outside of my family. So it would be something that was really strong in my family. We felt really Dutch and French. And so, and even, for example, like the food and just like the traditions is something that has been part of our family. So we would have like Christmas in the Dutch way in this like early December, and Christmas with the French way like mid to end December.
Oh, okay. So you did get to feel both. Okay, so good question. If it's World Cup and just by chance France is pitted against the Netherlands, what do you do?
That was always a source of conflict. Yeah, so basically what we would do, my mom feels very French, so obviously she would like have her French flag all over her, like her t-shirt and whatever. And then I'll be in the middle, and then on my right would be my dad with his Dutch flag, and I'll be in the middle with like both an orange like t-shirt and a French flag, and be like, I'm for both.
Right.
But yeah, it was really a source of conflict. Like my mom and dad would argue sometimes about like who's like the best country or whatever.
That's funny. And for me, like during the Olympics is usually the time that it affects me is that if it's American track and field, then I go for America. But it's the only time that I'm really rooting for America. Even though I was born here and everything like that, both of my grandmothers are from one grandmother's from Japan, one grandmother's from England. So I feel a sense of pride for those types of things depending on what it is. So if it's almost any sport besides track, I will go for Japan. And if it's like swimmers divers, usually divers, I'll go for England. I don't know. It's just kind of a piecemeal thing. It has no rhyme or reason to it. It's just like whatever reason I decided to feel really prideful during this time. But a couple years ago there was a half black, half Japanese runner from Japan, and I was really excited for that. That was pretty much like everything that I was wrapped up in one person made me really excited. But so I get that thing about the conflict of who do you root for. So you're just screaming every time someone makes a good play or scores a point, you're just happy either way.
Oh yeah, and it would be really fun. It's really convenient because you get to root for one country. If they lose, you can like root for the other. So
right, win-win.
Perfect.
One of the benefits of being mixed is you get to win all the time. That's funny. So as you were getting older, then, so you say like you kind of by middle school you're starting to become aware of. So here we would refer to it as blackness. How would you refer to it where you were growing up?
I would refer it to as like blackness, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're coming aware of your blackness as you're going into your teenage years and things like that. What was it like bridging the gap between you're realizing you were, different than the white people that you lived around into adulthood when now you probably understand yourself a little bit better? What is that patch of time like for you?
It was pretty rough, to be honest, because I was really lost. Because I was still like in overly like white middle school, high school, and it was just really a confusing time, I guess, because I didn't know where to go to understand how to come to terms with that, because I feel like I could never talk to my parents or my grandma about it because it's something they never even considered. It's not like we were even raised to feel or like to be aware that we were different. So it's something like I didn't reach out to my parents or anything because I knew they wouldn't offer me support, or they'll be, there's what are you talking about? Like, you're French and that's the end of it.
Oh, okay. So this is probably something that would be quite a bit different from here in the States, and maybe Canada too, but I think primarily here in the States is that we aren't, we're not typically very national. I mean, our news probably right now indicates difference with our president. But typically we're not very national. We're mostly, what our skin color is usually how we connect to people. So like we're aware of mixed people, I think, really quickly or really easily, and a lot of mixed kids do still struggle with who they fit in with and everything like that. But when I speak to people that are in other places, than the United States, they tend to be more national and like you're saying, not necessarily talking about what makes them different or unique from the other kids that are growing up with. So when do you, if you even have, maybe you haven't, when do you meet other mixed people? Have you encountered other mixed race people that identify as mixed?
Yeah, so I had one of two of my friends were mixed, actually, so it was really nice like having them around, basically. But it's not something I realized for example, like before middle school, I was like friends with them, but I didn't realize, oh, we have something more in common. We're like both mixed race. It's just something I looked at and I was like, yeah, we're friends, whatever.
So who do you feel is your people? Like, who do you feel the most comfortable around, particular groups of friends or family or whatever? Like, when do you feel not weird? I mean, there's a lot of times we just feel weird. Who makes you not feel weird?
Yeah, to be honest, I've grown up in a major like white community, so I'm pretty used to this. And I feel like because people have grown to be more aware recently, it's fine to like be around white people and feel not weird. At least for me, I've had some of my friends who were like more aware so that they would make me feel comfortable. But obviously, I would still hang out with like different crowds, and I have like obviously white friends, but I also have a lot of mixed friends. So it's good that in a sense that they understand also what I'm going through and how to cope with that, and just be like a nice support system. So it's a mix basically of like, white people and mixed people. But I was never really in a friend group with a majority of Black people. Basically, it's not something I'm used to, and
just not that much access to other Black people in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have an older brother and a younger sister.
And do they feel mixed, or have you ever talked about you guys being mixed together? Yeah,
I've talked to my sister a lot about it, but she's way younger, so obviously she's starting to understand that she's different, I guess, a bit like I did because she's in middle school.
Oh, okay.
So
that seems to be the time that a lot of us start to wake up to our difference or our uniqueness.
Yeah, so she's starting to ask questions like, oh, so this girl like said, for example, oh, but are you really French? And I was like, I don't know what to say. And so these questions that I had to go through, she's going through now. And it's really hard to be, because I kind of have to be that mother figure, because my mother's has taught us how to cope with these questions.
Right.
So I have to be there for her, basically.
No, and it's good that you are, because, I mean, you didn't have that same type of mixed role model, I guess, so giving that to your sister is probably a really great thing for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it makes me really happy that she's actually asking these questions. Because, for example, my brother doesn't feel mixed or Black. He just feels a white, and he has never even considered race in his life, I think. So we have really different perspectives and opinions on our heritage.
That's the same as me and my brother. Even though we grew up in the same house, the same neighborhood and everything, I'm Black and he's white. And even to the degree that like I will change between being Black or being Japanese depending on where I'm at, but I never feel white and I don't look white, so I'm never confused for being white. There are little things about being British that I enjoy, but when I've actually been in England, I did not feel British at all. I thought I was until I was around Brits. Like, the only Brits I was ever around was like my family, so until I was around a whole heap of them, then I realized, oh, you're not British at all. You just have a nana from there. So yeah, it's interesting how you can grow up in the same house and have totally different understandings, I guess, about who you are, race and ethnicity wise. So what has you in Great Britain right now? Is it school that you're? Yeah, so I'm at university there. So it's really interesting because it's a totally different country. So I get to experience being mixed in another country. And how is that like for you? When they ask the question, where are you from, is it primarily based off of your nationality, or do you feel that they're asking about your ethnicity as well? To be honest, that's a good question, because I never know if it's a country or ethnicity, but they always ask, where are you from? And I say France. And most of the times they're like, oh, but where are you really from? Or are you sure? Like, not are you sure, but it would be like, really? Like, because you don't look. And it's that. Gosh, it's amazing to me that this is so universal. So, I mean, I've always thought that this was like just primarily an American experience because, you know, we're kind of a country of orphans from our countries, right? Like, it's an immigrant country. Everybody comes from somewhere else. Everybody has ancestors from someone else. So whenever I hear that question, I just always assumed it was an American thing. But I've had Canadian guests, I've had French guests, and I've had British guests, and they've all said that at some point someone says, "Really?" or "Are you sure?" or "Yeah, I get it. You think you're from there, but what gives you the skin color that I'm that I'm looking at?" And so that's where I'm going to decide you're really from. And yet, primarily, if most of us went to the countries that are of color sides of us we wouldn't be from there either.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. So if I tell people, oh, like I feel black, or I'm mixed and I have like Malagasy heritage, and they're like, but you're not really black, like you've never been there. And it's like they just assume your identity for you and basically take it away from you all the time. And it's just something that I feel like is more prominent in like Great Britain, but maybe that's just me. I feel like it's something that is really apparent, because I feel like in France racism is really like shoved away and shoved aside, and they're like, oh, but it's not really a problem in France. But like in the UK, it's blatant. You can with these questions and oh, you're not really black, and that kind of stuff that comes up that I feel like I've experienced more in the UK than in France. But
yeah, I could see that as well. Just from sort of what we get exposed to, we usually hear that race is not that big of a deal, especially black people here. We have some of our historical black famous people that had ended up in France and were very accepted, like James Baldwin or Josephine Baker. So we have these American black people that went to France and then basically just kind of hunkered down in France because they felt a lot more accepted as black people in France than they ever did here in the States. And yet, lately we see that you guys have the same type of issues that we have in terms of views about Muslims and foreigners. Like you see a little bit more popping up, at least we do in our news, we see a little bit more of it popping up in France than maybe I did even 15 years ago or 10 years ago or something. When I've only been to Paris, and when I was there, I felt fine. Like I traveled there with my Japanese grandma and my Spanish uncle and my mixed white and Japanese aunt and me, and we got around usually using Spanish and Japanese mostly because it's such a tourist area that there was always somebody that spoke one of our languages, and it was fine. In London, though, or when I've been in England, they're very aware. And the fact that I'm walking around with a white cousin, well, why are you two together? He's white and you, I don't know what you are, like, why are you walking around together? And then you try to tell them, like, your family, and nobody believes you. It's like, well, they can hear my accent that I'm American, but they don't understand, like, why I have a white cousin. Like, it's not even a possibility that I could have a fully white cousin. So even in school, is the question, you usually get the question from other students, or is it just anywhere you're around that someone feels like you're different from them, so they need to ask? Yeah,
so it'd be sometimes in school if I'm new, obviously, or if I go around, I don't know, in a shop or something with my mom, or even on my own, they'll be like, oh, so where are you from? And so, it's basically like, everywhere, most of the places I went to, but it didn't come up like all the time, but you could sometimes it'll be a question, or sometimes it'll be people staring at you and be like trying to figure out where you're from. So
do you feel like now that you understand that you're mixed, and not only that you're just mixed ethnicity, but you're mixed culture and mixed multinational, with all of these different versions of mixedness that you have, do you feel like you are very grounded, like you understand yourself as a mixed person, or do you still feel like there's times when you just kind of don't know who you are?
I feel like right now I feel very much mixed, and it's something I'm really proud about. But obviously sometimes when I'm in spaces that I'm not used to, so for example, which is when it's a majority black people spaces, I'm always like, oh, I'm mixed, so that means I shouldn't really be there. So I always question it sometimes, because I've never been exposed to it, so I'm still uncomfortable, and I don't know where to put myself when it's in these spaces, but it's still getting there.
So I don't think that this is a concept in Great Britain or in France, but you'll have to correct me if it is the case, because it's very much the case here in the States that we have this concept here called the one drop rule. And it's actually from a racist idea that sprung up during what we refer to as the Jim Crow era, which is the time post-slavery and pre-civil rights, where they made all these laws that still continued to, for lack of a better term, enslave Black people. You know, they couldn't vote in some places, they couldn't get jobs or own property in some places. And so you would be determined if you were Black by this one drop rule. If you had even one drop of Black blood in you, you were Black even if you presented white. And nowadays that this is translated into, it's no longer used as like white people gave it to us, but it's no longer used as a white term, but Black people do it, where like if you're even a little bit Black, you get welcomed in as a Black person. You might get made fun of for your light skin or, you know, your hair or something like that, but it's usually always done in fun or in love or anything like that, right? Like they do point out your difference, but they do it with love and affection. Is that something that you have in either Great Britain or France, where you're around other Black people and they're very accepting of you, or because you don't feel that you belong there, do you ever get to that point?
No, I feel like they're always very accepting, and it's exactly as you described. Like, if you have like one drop, you're accepted basically. So it's a really welcoming community. It's just, as a person, I'm not used to it, so I don't feel comfortable. Right. But they make me feel comfortable.
Well, that's good. That makes sense. So in my experience, I don't get that with white people. I'm half white. My mother's father was white, and my father's mother was white, from different countries, but still white. But even though I'm half white, there's no point in my life ever that someone has either mistaken me for white or asked me or told or made me feel comfortable as a white person. Like instantly it's about whatever gave me the skin color that I have. I know you say because you grew up around more white people and things like that, you do tend to feel more comfortable in those spaces, but do white people make you feel comfortable? Like, are they welcoming of you as a white person or like a mixed white person?
They are welcoming, but do they make me feel always like comfortable? Not really. It's sometimes, you get those comments and just like, ignorant comments and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, but I mean, you've welcomed me here, yet you're not making me feel really comfortable. But that would be in some cases. It's not obviously in all cases. But I would get that from time to time. But overall, I would still feel comfortable enough because that's what I've always been used to, basically.
Right. No, that makes sense. What about mixed raceness or mixedness, however you like to term it for yourself, in general, do you either feel like you need the most or prefer the most, or you're not getting? Do you have things about mixedness that you just kind of crave or need from time to time?
I mean, I obviously crave things that I didn't have, like growing up, like knowing about my heritage or like what it means to be mixed race, or just like how to navigate through life as a mixed race person, because it's not something I'm used to, and like I've never been taught. And
they don't give us books or anything about it when we're growing up.
And it's just, so for example, like how to deal with my hair, because my mother, like, she had an afro like growing up or as an adult, but then she began to like straighten her hair, and now she has like this like super straight hair, and she doesn't know how to deal with my hair, and especially like...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting, because that would be the first time I've ever heard of a Black mother not knowing what to do with their mixed child's hair. Like here we make the joke that you can always tell if a biracial child has a white mother or a Black mother because of their hair, like the state of their hair. And you're always, like as a mixed person, you're just begging white mothers, like, please go to a Black salon and let them teach you how to take care of your child's hair. But this is the first time I've heard the reverse of that. So do you have what we refer to as wash and wear here? Like, can you just wash your hair and go out and it's fine? Or do you have to prepare it? Do you have to prep it in some kind of way?
I can wash and just go. But it's been kind of weird because my hair has changed like growing up. As I grew up, it's been more like, it's been curlier, like thicker. And it's just something my mother was really like shocked about because she's not used to it and she doesn't know how to deal with it. So for example, like I never went to a Black salon in my entire life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So did you walk around as a child was your hair just wild and crazy because your mom didn't care for it? Or did she at least like put in ponytails or braids or anything like that to calm it down when you were little?
Yeah, so basically, like, I never like wore like my hair down. My mom always put my hair in a bun or a braid because she didn't know how to deal with it. So yeah,
That's so funny. So now, how do you care for your hair? Do you go to black salons, or do you use certain mixed race hair care products, or how do you deal with it?
yeah. So I use like mixed like hair care products. Go to black salon. Like just like trying to take all of this that I didn't have growing up, like taking it back.
Right.
And like wearing my hair down for me is such a statement because I'm not used to it.
And there's probably like empowerment for you in that, that you've been able to take control of it. Wow, that's interesting. I love all these things that I get to talk to people where it's something so different from my own experience, or just a flipped version of what I know or have heard before. That's pretty amazing. So right now, like I saw you on the video just a few minutes before we got started. Your hair did look freshly washed and everything like that, but totally managed and everything. I looked crazy because it's the middle of the night and I didn't do anything to my hair before. I'm in my pajamas. So for you, like you feel like you have control of it now. You can just be your mixed ass self and you feel good about it?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's something I'm really proud about. And yeah, as you said, like my hair does help me feel grounded in that mixedness, I guess.
Right. So I've seen photos of you where you presented a little bit darker, but when I saw you in the video just now, you're a little bit on the paler side like I am. Do you have just times a year you're just darker during the summer and lighter during the winter months, or because you're in the UK right now you always have like overcastness and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, during the summer I'm pretty dark, and then because I'm in the UK there's no sun here, so basically I'm like close to being white, so it's a bit annoying, but yeah.
So one of the things that comes up a lot, and it's still an issue for me too, is that visibility. It's like, I know that I'll never be mistaken for white, so I'm okay with that. I don't really relate much to white people in general anyway, and even though I'm around them a lot for work and stuff like that, I never feel white or like white, like togetherness or anything like that. I do feel it with black people, but I also know that I'll never be dark enough that most people that aren't black, like black people know that I'm black, but like other people won't mistake me as black or anything like that. And Japanese just don't really believe that it's possible to be mixed and Japanese at the same time. So I don't have that either, but I still feel good about being black. And when a black person just identifies me as black without having to ask me any questions, and they just talk to me already, like they already know I'm black, it makes me feel really good and visible, and I'm proud, that I have that moment. Do you have things like that also, where somebody acknowledges something about you and you just feel normal during that time?
Yeah, it's like meeting like black people and they'd be like, oh, make weird comments about white people, like these white people are always doing this, and I'm like, you've like said like basically that I wasn't like that I was black, so like it makes me feel really good. Like when people just like, I don't know, assume you're white and actually like see your blackness is kind of something I'm not used to. So it just makes me feel really happy. Right.
It's funny. Some of these things really are universal. You and I aren't mixed exactly the same, and yet so much of what you've said is something that I can relate to as or having had that same experience, for myself too, where it's like, oh gosh, we really do need to be around more mixed folks so that we can feel like this on a regular basis, or be there for other mixed people like you are for your little sister right now, and kind of filling those gaps that weren't filled for you when you were little. Even though both of my parents were mixed, we didn't really deal with me being mixed or them being mixed until I started to ask the questions. They didn't, they help you learn how to read and they help you learn how to do your homework and stuff like that or whatever, but it was never like, one day someone's gonna say, your dad is a different color than you, and here's how you deal with it. Like, that never happened. So it's nice to have these conversations with people and kind of figure out those ways in which we could be helpful to other mixed race people, or at least that's the way I'm feeling because of all these conversations that I'm having. So what do you love the most about being a mixed race person?
Well, apart from having to pick both sides in the World Cup, it's just something that I feel like really like passionate about. I'm really proud. It's just being able to have experience in some ways so many cultures, and getting to know different countries, like culture and history, just something that makes you feel like richer, I guess. And just being able to transcend like these barriers that people put with like, oh, stick to that country and that's all you get. And we are actually like representing multiple like continents even.
Yeah.
It's just something that I'm really proud about. But like obviously there's a lot of people that say, oh, but like that means like, oh, like mixed kids are like their parents are not racist or blah blah blah. But that's sometimes a bit like, we're not going to solve like the world's problem just by being born by a white parent and a black mother. It's not, it all just not depends on us. But apart from that, it's something I'm really like proud about. Just getting to have friends from different countries and have that culture and being able to relate to, and so to some extent, to like so many different people.
Yeah, I think we have a unique skill in that regard, in that because we're multiracial, multicultural, sometimes multinational, that we, even if they're not like us, we already know what it's like to be different. So it's a lot easier for us to engage with people that are different from us. I think, I mean, I'm biased, but but I do think we have that unique ability, or at least we're more skilled at it, probably because of our mixed ethnicity. But before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would want to share with the audience or impart about mixedness or your feelings about mixedness?
To be honest, not really. It's just like I've said all I had to say, but it's just like, thanks for having your show, because it's honestly something I needed. Like I was on Spotify, I look at a search bar like, oh, I need a mixed like podcast. So I'm really happy this show is going strong.
I mean, that's the thing. Like I've said it a few times where I made the podcast that I wanted to hear. Like, I'm going around searching in toolbars and looking for it, and there'd be a few things here and there. There's a couple, most of them are like limited runs, where it's like a 6 or 10 episode thing, and it's just more like a news oriented thing about mixedness. But there was very few things that were about like the mixed experience. It was mostly like, here in America, blah 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 blah, blah mixed people, or there was things like that, but it wasn't about just like regular mixed people talking about what it's like for us. And so I started the show with that in mind. I wanted to talk to other mixed people, and I wanted to find out what life was like for them and compare it to, or contrast it with what it's like for me, and to hear that was something you needed too, it wasn't just me who was out here looking for that kind of stuff. I'm glad. I'm just glad that you're exactly the type of person that I would have wanted to connect with, for this, because that was the goal. Like I wanted selfishly to talk about being mixed and to meet other mixed race people. So thank you so much for reaching out and for your support of the show. It's been awesome being able to connect with you via email, and I hope that we get to do that again, and that now you're part of the militantly mixed community. So
for sure.
That's it for this episode of Militantly Mixed. Thank y'all for joining me on this mixed race journey. And don't forget to be your mixed ass self. Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.